Welcome back for story time today, you guys. Wow, this is such a neat book by Jacqueline Woods, Showay. And I'm going to try and do my best reading. Obviously, I do know how to read, but this definitely has a little bit different language. And it's got kind of a powerful emotional story when you think about it. And so, Miss K, and what a crybaby I am. But what a beautiful story. Showay, it talks about how back when they couldn't write and read, they would make these quilts to tell their story, and they called it the Showay. Look at all these beautiful people. And this is actually a history of Jacqueline Woodson's family. When Suny's great great grandma was 7, she was sold from the Virginia land to a plantation in South Carolina without her ma or pa, but with some muslin her ma had given her, and 2 needles she got from the big house, and thread dyed bright red with berries from the chokecherry tree. In South Carolina, Big Mama raised Suny's great great grandma, raised most of the slave children on that large patch of land. At night, Big Mama told the children stories she'd tell in a whisper about children growing up and getting themselves free. And the children leaned in and listened real hard. And in the daytime, when there was some few minutes for a slave to rest a bit, Big Mama taught Suny's great great grandma to sew colored thread into stars and moons and roads that slave children grew up and followed, late in the night, a piece of quilt and the true moon leading them. The quilt was showing them where to go to get free. The freedom quilts. Years passed. Big Mama moved on to the next world, and Suny's great great grandma grew up and jumped broom with a young man named Ensler. Had herself a baby girl and named that child Matthias May. Loved that baby up so, yes, she loved that baby up. And one day Matthias May would be Suny's grandma, but not for a long, long time yet. In the meantime, she learned to sew. Beautiful girl child learned to sew. When Matthias May was 7, she got sold away. Took a star from her mama's blanket, took a piece of the road, pressed it to her face when she wanted to remember back home, held it to her heart to feel back home, got herself a piece of muslin and some thread somewhere and kept up her sewing. Sewed so fine she was making clothes for everyone in the big house and slaves too. And at night she sewed stars and moons and roads, tiny patch pieces of stars and moons and roads. Slaves whispered what no one was allowed to say, that Matthias knew how to make. She's teaching them the way to get free on her quilt. A showaway. Come to her when they need to talk. Came to her for the stories of brave peoples, came to her for a patch piece just before they disappeared into the night. So her quilt was actually a map too. Pretty cool, the showway. But Matthias May stayed on, grew tall and straight-boned, jumped broom with another slave. That slave was killed, running off to the north side of the war months before he got to meet his baby, a girl child, who was born free that same year, 1863. History went and lost her name. Years later, Suny came. Suny's mama held her up in the moonlight night, showed her the stars, the moon whispered into her ears. There's a road, girl, there's a road. Loved that Suny up so, yes, she loved that Suny up. Suny and her mama stayed on the land. They'd always known picking cotton for a little pay and a piece of that ground to farm. Called that land home. Stayed on with other people, none of them slaves anymore. Hard working, making a life from pink day to blue black night. But it was a free life just the same. And when the day was finally over, wasn't hard to find a thing to do, thing or two to smile about. At night they cut and sewed strange lines and odd designs. People said about Suny, that child could find some beauty in so many things. When Suny was 7, she was tall and straight-boned like her mama. Took in wash with her mama, sewed stars on patch pieces, sewed stars and moons and roads, sewed fields and rivers and trees, patched the pieces together for her mama to sell come market day. Called those quilts Trail to the North, called the quilts Showway. Didn't much need that secret trail to the north anymore, but started living well off the money those quilts brought in. Sewed those quilts to live, sewed those quilts to remember, and though some could book read, most could not. Stars and moons and roads, picture reading was what they'd always known. Some morning Suny looked out over the fields of cotton and dreamed of a place to call her own. Married a man named Walter Scott, who owned a bit of land in Anderson, South Carolina. Had herself a baby girl, named that girl Georgiana. Loved that baby up so, yes, loved that baby up. Georgiana, who grew tall and straight-boned and free, picking out words from her mama's Bible by 3, reading by oil lamp light at age 5. People say about Georgiana, she always had a book in her hand. Grew up to teach at a small school in Anderson. Had herself 2 girls at once, named them Caroline and Anne. Loved those babies up so, yes, they loved those babies up. And Caroline and Anne grew up tall and straight-boned, turned 7, walking in a line to change the laws that kept black people and white people living separate. They were a little bit scared sometimes, but pinned inside their dresses were showway patches Grandma Suny had given them, and something about those patches made Scared hang his mean old head and walk away. Anne grew up writing poems, and sometimes she made the poems into songs. Caroline stitched those songs into art that people bought to hang up on their walls. Anne had me, and Mama loved this baby up so, yes, she loved this baby up. And when I was 7, I didn't have to work in a field or walk in any freedom lines, but I still read like Georgiana and wrote like Anne. And when the words were slow in coming, I sewed stars and moons and roads into quilts and curtains and clothes, because Mama said, all the stuff that happened before you were born is your own kind of showway. There's a road, girl, my mama said, there's a road. And I grew up tall and straight-boned, writing every day, and the words became books and told the stories of many people's showways. Had a baby and named that child Tashi Georgina. Loved that Tashi up so. Yes, I loved that Tashi up. So some mornings I start all over, holding tight to little Tashi. I whisper a story that came before her. Now, Suny was your great-great-grandma, and when Suny's great-great-grandma was 7, there's Suny, there's the twins, there's the author, there's her daughter, Tashi Georgiana. The end.